Ezinne, very much appreciate having you guys here on the Unstacked Startups podcast. How's your day going so far? And very excited to jump into this.
Yeah, no, I can't. I've been waiting for this podcast episode with you. We are sitting pretty across from each other in sunny Austin, and we're gonna have a good day.
Full transparency. You guys are partners in business, partners in life. You guys have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old dynamic duo. I'm so pumped to do this with you guys. You guys wrote Building Rocket Ships, Product Management for High Growth Companies. What's the book about? Can you give the audience a little bit of a backdrop?
Oji and I have had very similar experience, having been engineers and then product leaders, so product managers and then leaders. And one of the things that is actually similar about our experience is that while doing that, we've gotten a chance to talk to, mentor, work with startups and have seen what it takes to actually build ground up. The reality is, whether you're intentionally doing it or not, there is a way in which you hire, reward, train your people to run and build products, and which we call the system of people, right? And then there's also a way in which you set direction or not set direction, change direction, communicate direction, create strategy. And that's what we generally call the systems of strategy. And then last but not least, we actually have this, how do you execute? What is it that you're sharing along the way? What processes do you have? What rituals do you have? What do you lean into? The reality is these things together is what we generally call the product operating system. And those things are actually what defines and allow you as an organization to determine how fast your rocket ship will be launched and how successful you'll be.
The thing I would say is maybe a little bit of motivation. We've been in world-class companies that have grown and made a lot of money for their shareholders, for their founders, and brought a lot of love to their customers. You know, Procore is storied in construction, Bazaar Voice, Twitter, Calendly, Atlassian. And this is a front row seat to how the best in the world build. And at the same time, we have worked with startups all over the world, Africa, India, in the United States, who are trying to replicate the same magic. And what we realize is that people don't know, because this is arcane sophistry. Like, the knowledge to build a great company isn't actually that well dispersed in the world if you work with teams all over the world, whether it's Europe or whatever. We wanted to write a book that brought that closer for builders, for founders, for product managers, even for executives who need to see and understand how to hire these people and figure out what they do so they can help them mentor. You know, between Ezinne and I, we've had a lot of years of product management, of marketing, of company building. How do we make that available to people who want it? Because a lot of people want it. And so that's what's in the book. Building Rocket Ships is sort of a love letter to product building and how to do it properly.
That's great. And I think just to hammer this home to the audience, you know, Oji, you led product, at Atlassian, you're the chief product officer at Calendly, Parsable, headed up elements of product at Twitter, like Typeform. I mean, these are companies that everybody is aware of that in many ways have changed the way we live, we work. And as not to sell yourself short, you kind of pass the baton over to Oji, but yourself, you have done amazing work at Procore as their VP product, and owning they're working on their owner's market team and WP Engine. I mean, I honestly can't think of anybody else who's better suited than the dynamic duo here to build this book and to explain to people, hey, here's the ideas we synergize together in terms of how we go out and build this product operating system, as you guys call it. So you guys, you touched on
Flattery will get you everywhere.
So that's right. That's the secret, right? But you guys kind of brushed over it. I felt like I had to hammer that home. And so this product operating system, you talked about people and getting people to move in this direction. You talked about direction as another pillar here, and execution. Maybe let's talk a little bit about people, which also is a space that I come from, which is building teams and working with people all the time. But I'd love to hear from you guys. How do you think about people as it relates to building a product-led organization?
I'll use a counterexample. in our business of building software companies, by the way, remember, I didn't just talk about building a product or building technology. A software company is technology, it's product, and it's the business model, because we have to make money. We have to serve a market. In a business of building software companies, specifically, at least as it stands today, talent is everything, right? I used to tell people that at Microsoft we banked talent. Like we had like 1,000 PhDs that we didn't want Google to hire or our competitors to hire, because it was basically fungible talent we could throw at many different problems. So the system of people is basically, you have to design how you can get the most out of every brain you bring in to this software company, especially when you're early on, in order to make it succeed. Now, every system we talk about exists. It always exists. There's always a system of people. There's always a system of direction. There's always a system of execution. The problem is sometimes those systems aren't well thought through. They are sort of implicit versus explicit. You inherit them as a hodgepodge. You haven't thought it through. Does it work? You don't know. You just take stuff for granted. And so with the same thing with people always come in and out of your organization. If you have money and you can pay them and you have stuff to do, what we want to do is for you to optimize, give you ways to optimize them and harness them properly. So in System of People, we talk about how you hire people, how you design an organization, how you place people within that, how you even like do interviews, how you motivate people. So there's a lot of human psychology, like Virgin and HR, how you get them to the next level, how you find exceptional people. In the pro version of the book, we even like have these templates that you can actually just use. It's not just the book, words in the book. You can, digital copy, you can download them and use them for yourself. That's really it. Is the System of People is harnessing the brains that you have available to you to do the good work, and how you collect them into the teams that can be effective.
The reality is that different organizations, different industries are at different places, and that usually drives some of what it is that we're looking for. So when the fintech was really getting into PLG and a lot of new software was being built in fintech, you're looking for people who have domain expertise, but you also need people who understand what it is to actually build products. And there's currently a debate on, should you get a domain expert or should you get a product expert? And for me, it's almost inconsequential. The things that I honestly look for now has changed over time. And it's the idea of curiosity and humility together are so important right now. It is being extremely curious about what technology is out there, how the business is moving, and just wanting to be a lifelong learner, right? And then the humility that you can know but may not know. That puts you, front-footed. And those are some of the soft things that we look for.
I love that, and I think so relevant today, and we'll get to this more further down the conversation as we talk a little bit about what's changed as it relates to product and organizations that are scaling and AI specifically. But one of the things that we talk a lot about with our partners is unlearning and learning new things, whether that's on a product perspective or as a software engineer or as a go-to-market professional, whatever it is. I think those people need to be curious. They need to be humble. They need to be willing to unlearn and learn at all times. That's a great point, Ezinne, on curiosity and humility.
Yeah, I want to add something to the curiosity and learning. One of the curses of having a long track record in technology actually is that you get arrogant, right? You're like, I've seen this movie before, and so it can't be done this way. And so one of the things Ezinne and I have taught ourselves is, even though we're confident in the patterns we've seen in the loom of time and strategy, we've actually learned a lot in business school. We both took this amazing class called Strategy in Telecommunications, Media, and Technology Companies, which felt like seeing the pattern behind technology companies. Even though we have all that kind of training, we counsel executives and CPOs to have some humility. We say every 3 years, pretend you don't really know what you know, because that's the whole point of newness. Whatever was impossible 10 years ago might be possible today. So if you keep thinking it's impossible, someone is going to come and eat your lunch. So you're like, you know what? We know the pattern, but things might have changed. So you do experiments. You allow people to say and do irrational things so that you don't lock in your arrogance and the time and the technology of your youth into assumptions of the future and therefore miss a market. And this is super important, even for those who have a lot of experience.
Oji, yourself, I mean, you've seen successful organizations scale and product organizations. And I mean, I've gotten to know you over the past few weeks. I know you're a down to earth, humble guy, but I assume it was very important for you to put that in action and to get your team to believe that they're fallible and that they can make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, I allowed them to teach me. They're like, hey, we want to try this. I don't shoot it down. I'm like, I tried it like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It didn't quite work, but this is a fresh take. Okay. How can we do it in 2 weeks so we know if there's a there? That's the kind of conversation you have to have. Otherwise, you're going to shut down innovation. Remember, the job is to get the most out of the most fun and the most productivity from people, making them feel good about their purpose at your company. Being a good leader, product leader, is actually like, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not formulaic. You have to have soft skills. You have to have, and you have to have some humility. So yeah, I think of myself as a regular guy. I just try not to get balkanized into that I know everything. There's more knowledge, I say this all the time, outside my brain than inside it, and there will always be. And so you have to have you have to be permeable.
I'm smiling as you're saying that because I was watching Ezinne's facial reaction. I feel like she's heard you say that one or two times before.
Yes.
It's something we use with our kids. We actually say that quite a bit. Like even in, you have 2 ears, you have 2 eyes, and just 1 mouth. So just, take all that information that exists outside of you first, and you'll be better for it.
That's great. That's great.
No, I think that, there is that humility in terms of your teams, et cetera. But I think even more importantly is the customers. Like when you know that you don't know everything about what it is they want, you lean in a little different. I didn't know much about construction, and yet here I was tasked with building a data platform for the construction industry, right? I had built a data platform for the retail industry at Bazaar Voice, my job prior, and I could have gone in and said, let's just do the same thing. But by listening to my founder, Tui, at that point in time, listening to the CTO, and then listening to the customers, there were so many more insights that I was able to leverage and figure out, oh, wow, there's even more data that can be productized here. And that led to us going public not just as a collaboration platform, which is how Procore started, but as a construction intelligence platform. And it just came from listening to our customers and truly, truly trying to understand how they think of the data, what data they're putting into the platform, et cetera, et cetera. So humility, not just in the leadership leading the team, but in going out and acting as though it's the first day and just being open to what one can hear. Still using your product sense and your experience from the years, but just being open to the information and going in with so much curiosity. I think you can get to the heart of the matter faster, find the sharp problem faster.
That's great. And Ezinne, you mentioned as it relates to people and talent, a big part of this is context and industry and fit with and culture within a specific team. Maybe, and I'm just curious, Oji, Ezinne, Ezinne, you've spent more time in enterprise. Oji, maybe, the startup, high growth, scale story. Do you guys think about it differently as it relates to people? And Ezinne, you talked about there's kind of a meeting in the middle and a melding between the two, but I don't know. How do you build product teams? Is it the same? Is it exactly the same for an earlier startup or a large enterprise? Or maybe Ezinne, you go for it.
I don't think it's the same. And this is, again, why context matters, and understanding your direction and your strategy really needs to feed into how you hire. I think that generally the enterprise team's bigger, usually a much larger team, but even more importantly, a lot of people who've been there for a long time, right? And you don't get to build your team oftentimes. You get to coach, and if they're the wrong folks, you have to manage a few folks out. So first off, you go and assess what's going on, figure out where you want to go, and then figure out who you want to go there with. That's the first thing. And then ask yourself, how do the people that you have on your team fit into that future story, right? I think that's just every leader has to go in and go do that. Once you know where you're going, who you want to go with, figure out how then do you build that over time. There are organizations where they go in and clean up shop. That's not what I believe, because I do think it affects morale, it affects the people. These are humans. I do think also that if you spend time getting to know folks, you can actually quicken their hearts towards that thing that it is that vision you have. I think those are core things you need to know first, and then you layer in the things we spoke about, the competencies, the values, the traits and behaviors, and then look at the makeup of your team. I'll give you an example. At my last company, we had a lot of good strategists, a whole lot of amazing strategists. And you want that when you're trying to transform. One of the things, after we did all the personality tests and I spent time with them and all those things, we didn't have finishers. We just didn't. There are people who love to ideate, talk, work together, collaborate. And so the next time I was hiring a leader, that was a core part of what it was that I was seeking, because I needed the institutional knowledge of all the folks who had been there. But yes, product sense, communication, strategy, all the things you look for. But important to me was this trait of completing, being able to finish. The people who actually are detail oriented, it needed to be there to balance out my team. So I don't know if that helps, but that's a core difference I think that sometimes comes to play in enterprise organizations or big organizations.
Yeah, look, I'll just add a thing. Like one of the things that I worked at Bridgewater Associates, the biggest hedge fund in the world, for about a year. And the thing that Ray Dalio, one of the things I took away was this idea that most tech companies transact almost very simplistically with talent. It's like, what are your skills? It turns out that that is too shallow a framework for thinking about the people you need to get to what you want. And so at Bridgewater, there's this framework: skills, values, and attributes, right? And values are really like, what are the things that motivate you, right? And attributes are like, what are your intrinsic proclivities? Like, some people are a bull in a china shop. Some people are like super bold. That's how they approach life. Some people are very contemplative, whatever that is, and they make slow decisions. And of course, you have the skills. And so the thing that changes over time are twofold. One is the V and the A you need startups are different, right? You want people who love ambiguity, who can take risk, who can take a big white space and paint it. They'll not only go and ask what are the goals, they'll find the goals and then they'll execute the goals. Most people just want goals and then they can execute on them. And some people can barely do that. And so your VAS is very different. The skills can be the same across growth paths, but the VA, very different. And then the second thing that changes is what Ezinne mentioned, is that as a product leader, you have a bigger and bigger Lego blocks. You have to build bigger teams. And so the person doing that building has to be more sophisticated. They have to find the intersections and the gaps and fill them, right? And they have to keep that moving constantly. In fact, one of the things that non-first-time managers figure out is that if you're not spending 50% of your time on the people system, which is varied, multiple systems in the people system, and actually in communicating, which is part of leadership. If you're not spending 50%, you're probably doing it wrong. But when you come up the path, you always think this is a waste of your time, and it's wrong. You fully have to be spending more than 50%, otherwise you're not gonna do very well. And which is why eventually people hire product ops, right? Because eventually that thing can take up to 90% of your time, and then you find that you can't talk to the board, you can't talk to customers, you can't talk to the C-suite, and you become ineffective. And so you need some leverage for that.
It's interesting as you guys talk passionately about people and about talent. And I say that from you're talking to someone who loves that element of, technology companies. And I didn't mean to hijack this conversation to gear it all. I swear.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. You're just as selfish as selfish.
No, no. People is critical.
But I'll spin it right back to you. I was going to ask you guys, the book that you guys co-authored, who's the ICP audience? My maybe incorrect assumption was, hey, this is for product managers, this is for a head of product, or, that's kind of the scoop. But I'm hearing from you guys, this is relevant to probably all leaders at a technology organization, founders in different functions, people leaders, etc. Am I off base here?
No. Let me take a first crack at it.
Yeah.
So it's a T-shaped book, okay? And there's something important about the book you should understand. The book is, we are not dumping frameworks in you. We are trying to find the logic behind what is necessary to grow a company, right? It's almost like in the book, you will feel like you're revealing secrets. When we send it out to the first reviewers, they're like, oh my God, this thing is so important, not to self-aggrandize or anything. So it's a T-shaped book. It is for senior product people up to the chief product officer. That's the vertical part. The T is executives, the CFO, the CEO, the CEO, the CIO, the people who need to collaborate with the product function to create return on capital. The thing is, intuitively, people know what the CTO does and what the CFO does and what the CEO does. But who really knows what the CPO does and what they're supposed to do and what space they're supposed to occupy? CPOs are kind of new. It's like 20 years maybe, if that. And so if you are a COO or a CFO or CEO who wants to understand the best way to collaborate with the product function, you should read this book. You work in the startup space. There's sort of an unknown secret, which is the relationship between a CPO and a CEO is, oh my God, it is the most delicate and the most important thing for return on capital. A friend of mine who I'm mentoring, the AI company, super high growth, raised a lot of money. They just separated with their CPO, right? Because of relationship problems or not understanding what they're trying to do problem. And so this is so key. If you want to be a responsible CEO, COO who wants to partner with the product function to help mentor it, partner with it, help even write a rec to hire your CPO, this is the kind of thing you should be reading.
Yeah. It's a book for product builders. I think that's what we said. Product builders and those who partner and want to do right by the product builders. The book is actually broken out in two pieces, which is how do you actually create a product that is a rocket ship? And then how do you have and create an organization that can sustain and repeat those rocket ships? The second part of the book where we talk about the operating system, the first part is really about product-led growth, the details of how. And it's important because, like Oji said, many people don't even know how to define what product management is. And it's funny, as we were wrapping up the book, we went back and wrote, what is it that product managers do? Because we've seen people say, CEO of the product, you do everything to make the product successful. And that is not clarifying in any way, right? It's actually you're anything. Like your job is anything. That is not helpful. So part of what we do is start off saying, okay, what is it that a product manager does so that people that are executive supporting understand the core function of the why.
We even share some math to show you why it intensifies return on capital. Because this is the kind of language that executives need to understand in terms of the people investment.
So I mean, I don't want to be one of those people that say, oh, go read the book. Simply put, the product management. I know. I don't want to. That's not the point. Product management, like the core. Why? The why is to reach like 10x your return on capital. If you can find your way in so many ways, but with a product manager, it amplifies you. The what they do is, first off, they help you with that product solutioning, finding a sharp problem and finding the solution to it. That's the first big nut. The second part is helping you get that to the market. And that's where the product-led growth piece comes out. What are the interfaces, the digital touch points that have to be built to get that product out to market? What is the customer experience? And the last is evolution. You solve the problem today, but the customer is changing, the technology is changing, the landscape is changing, you want to grow more, so evolving the product. So those are the core three things. It's not every and anything. That being a product manager involves those three things from our perspective. And then we go into the how of product management. So there's the why, the what, and the how. And the book really tries to break it down so that it's not woo-woo magic out there, but it's clear so that folks who are product builders and those working along product builders can then be helpful for the process.
Ezinne, you're not just enterprise focused.
Not at
You
all.
go the whole suite here.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm able, so my secret, my superpower, and this is said by someone else, is the ability to take startup lingo, jargon, and make it such that those who have no clue about it, right, in enterprises can at least adopt it and desire it and then change culture towards it. So that's the superpower in this transformation.
Ezinne, Oji, you guys have seen the good, the bad, the ugly, the everything in between as it relates to scaling technology companies, as it relates to product at technology companies. And in the last few years, you guys have been on the frontier of what certainly feels like a seismic shift in this industry, and that's artificial intelligence. You guys are probably privy to strategy conversations around how do we think about product moving forward. I mean, maybe a good place to start is, what do you guys see as the most exciting, possibly under discussed opportunities for product innovation in this AI native era that we're entering? So, OG, maybe I'll just put you right on the
I
spot
feel
there.
like you are, I get like, all these research companies, hedge funds try to ask the same question. I don't think anyone really knows the precise answer to that. But I will say that a couple of things. There is some value to having seen like a product career that's seen a lot of discontinuities. Like we're barely Padawans when the transition from like client server computing to the cloud, and within that era was the World Wide Web. And for each of these things, they're like iconic companies. Client server is things like Sun Microsystems and Oracle is still running around. The cloud obviously is Amazon. In between, internet native companies like Twitter, social media, Salesforce, Atlassian, that kind of thing. And so all these were discontinuities that created a lot of value. And so now as we stare at this new one, the question is what changes and what remains the same? One is there's going to be a lot of change and we're not really prepared for it. I saw 15% companies that have sort of scaled to 20 million ARR very quickly. It started with Jasper, when GP 3.0 came out, Jasper.ai, and so on. But there's things like Lovable, Clay, and so on and so forth. They're doing incredible stuff. So we're seeing a huge shift in how people build great software companies. But at the same time, we caution that this shouldn't scare people because there are workflows that are very stable. The MarTech workflow, if you take out the technology from it, is people have sold for centuries, right? People have marketed for centuries because it's about creating demand. We have a software industry, so people have to build things. So there's a builder, a huge billions of dollars worth of builder. What we call picks and shovels. Like as people try to figure this stuff out, there are picks and shovels that people have to use to go for the gold rush. And there's going to be companies who focus on this graph database companies, and so on and so forth, vector database companies that are coming up. So if you focus on the workflows that cut across everyone in enterprise or maybe just a specific department, and you can distill those workflows outside the software that currently does because technology has changed. So if you can sort of distill the workflows that are agnostic of the current level of tools, which basically call them cloud front end tools, and use this new, more powerful, awesome tool, which is transformer-based AI, which makes things sort of encapsulates a lot more complexity in the code because models are basically code. You can find places where there's a lot of value in this thing. So two things are changing very fast. We actually don't know all the ways it will change. Two, there are workflows that are stable. If you can distill them and understand the market for them, you can apply the changing stuff, chase that with your curiosity, and apply it to the stable places where there's always value from decade to decade. I think that people will prosper.
Our brains work really differently, but they always end up in the same general direction. Oji said picks and shovels, and that's just, it's one of those principles where, like, when we're looking for opportunity or talking to startups and advising them, we always say, hey, what are the tools that are needed for this new thing, this trend? And pay attention to that. So if I were going to offer to your listeners, like the way I ran innovation back in the day. And as I step back and think about AI, what are those tools that matter? And in order to do that, you need to actually pay attention to all the workflows, like pay attention to the workflows, particularly in companies that are product building. What is it that they're doing, right? Either you're creating the platform that enables those workflows, or you're creating the tools that feed into the platform that enables those workflows. That's where some opportunity lies. The second is paying attention to the vertical solutions, right? Like if you're going to spend time in finance, what does finance look like now with AI? What does construction look like with AI? What changes? Is there any new platform that needs to be built around how value is delivered? So that's another way you can actually seek opportunity. And the last is my favorite, enablers. Like what does AI actually enable? I think sometimes people forget, they start to use the technology, the trend, and forget to say, okay, stepping back, what is generative AI really enabling
What are the
for
new
us? What are
capabilities
the
that
new
it brings to the
capabilities?
market?
Exactly. Right? If you then understand that, like AI is truly just a toolkit, a big box of tools, right? If you step back and truly understand
New tools,
new tools, if you
which is
step
why it's
back,
important.
if you step back and then ask, okay, what are the new capabilities? Then you can now look in many different places you may be passionate about, and say, now that this capability of content generation exists, right? What can I do with fill in the blank? Now that this capability of, Oji, what else are some of the core capabilities? Like, how does it change this particular
Summarization,
summarization? How does
Pattern
it change
reasoning.
recognition. Yeah.
recognition? How does it
Hmm.
change? And this works mostly in the B2C space, right? So we spend a lot of time in B2B, enablers, workflows, picks and shovels. But if you step back and understand what generative AI is enabling and the capabilities it brings, it allows you to reimagine a lot of the existing solutions and interfaces in new ways. So that's
Okay.
how I would break it down
No,
as
no, no.
people seek opportunities.
I'll say one more thing. Like you're right, we end up in the same place. Think of opportunity as continents. It's a land grab. It's just recycled because basically here was the technology level in the last 10 years. It just went this way. Everything that we've had is going to be rebuilt in a new, more efficient AI driven way. So where are those places of opportunity? And in business, it's kind of stable. We know what they are. They're going to be enterprise orchestration, which are the places where Microsoft and Google stay, like communication, collaboration, whatever. Slack will recycle.
Yes.
Outlook will recycle. Teams will recycle. Document management and knowledge management, things that the whole enterprise needs, are going to change, right? They're going to be different. They're going to serve the same purpose. There will be better tools. The things that power marketing and sales, reset. We've invested and worked in companies that are doing these things already. Like one of the things that I'm working on is building some of these picks and shovels at Phalanx, which is a new studio I'm building. In entertainment is more wide open. Entertainment is sort of like, Russian roulette. We'd actually never know, like leisure. What does mindfulness change to when there's, what does counseling change to? What does fun? What does dating happen? These are all perennial, stable workflows. I'm calling them workflows, but they're going to change because technology level is expanding. So these are the places where people will find quick value. A lot of things that are happening today will pass because when new wine comes, people try to stuff it in old wine skins and it only lasts for a little bit. When Microsoft found the internet, we did a whole pivot. It was a whole hullabaloo. We bought Mosaic and built a web browser. And we're like, yeah, we've arrived. It's, this is the web. But that wasn't where the action was. The action was mobile. The action was Twitter. The action was Facebook. The action was Google. And so we missed a lot because the first thing we found we thought was going to be the rest of the future of the internet wave, and it wasn't. So we're in a very fast creative thing. But if people focus on what's perennial, what has human value, someone taught me that basically the killer app is something that digitizes with new technology, something that humans have needed for 5,000 years. That's one way to think about it.
Same needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are just some things that are out there: collaboration, entertainment. They stay the same, but the technology changes, and we enable it, and we architect it, and reassemble it in a different way.
Ezinne, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you had to name one AI native product category that not enough people are thinking about.
Oh, wow.
I'm glad she asked you first because I now have time to think about it.
There are two that, and they're pains because I think that we're not thinking about it and they'll be problematic in the long run, and they probably stay more in the ethical piece. It's data provenance. And during South by Southwest, I sat in a panel that Oji was on where we had to talk about the source, like almost like a nutrition label for Gen AI, generative AI, and all the tools it enables. So, first is how did it get its data? What was it trained on? Just really being crisp, because many big decisions will be made from models that we don't fully understand or from things that have been trained. And we really need to figure out what we want to do if we're okay with that. When I was building construction intelligence, we needed to at least figure out what is our source? Where did it get changed? And we were trying our best to create these dictionaries and catalogs to keep track. Those seem to be out the window right now. I don't know why. So there's something to be solved here. And at the same time, how do we rank this solution? How do we rank this LLM? How do we label it so that we know how authentic it is, how much it hallucinates, all the things? I don't know if that makes sense, but
Oh, it
that
absolutely.
keeps me up at night.
I think it makes sense. I think it's so fundamentally important to figure that out in terms of how we live as a society, democratic world like we do, and
It's not even about the ethics of it alone. As companies are being built on top of each other, it will become important, even in valuation, because we can say all these nice things, and the reality is people want to be profitable, they want to make money. But at some point, somebody's going to build a company that's built on another person's company, that's another person's idea, and we're going to have to figure out how to pull things apart. And I just don't know how we're doing it. Oji, maybe you have the answer to all of this.
give it to
No,
us, OG.
I mean,
What's the answer?
Yes.
no, yes, I still remember the panel from South by, and the long story short is data provenance is a problem, but it's also a market problem. We will need to be able to trace the veracity of the data we use because models are basically code. That's what I tell people. We have this framework. We spend time doing workshops with companies who are trying to crack the AI future
Mm-hmm.
of their company, evolution of their company, because there's going to be a lot of death. And so reinvention will prevent death. Even at Typeform, I am the co-founder of Typeform, created Formulas, which was the next generation of Typeform. And we were trying to disrupt ourselves because we knew that it was going to come, right? And if we waited, someone will come do it. And so the point of that is that there's this thing is AI at the edge, which is people are trying to sprinkle AI into old code. And then this framework of junk that stuff and build native. If your code, your next product is not more than 50% model and prompt, you're probably doing it wrong because that itself encapsulates almost 1 million lines of code because it can do all the logic in the model itself, if that makes sense. It's not very precise because of hallucination. So maybe not use it for auditing and whatever, but it covers a lot. And this is the worst it will ever be. So provenance is important because everything will be built on it. Very, very important. And this is the kind of thing that our industry doesn't do very well. We're sort of irresponsible. We will throw stuff out there like social media and we won't care how it changes the world. And then we'll there's no one to hold responsible except, and Congress can't do it, if that makes sense. But actually, the thing I wanted to talk about is maybe twofold, and my own contribution to your question is people are wowed about all the latest buzzwords about MCP, models, this and that, O3 mini, all the stuff. The biggest change in society will be economic, right? Meaning that it'll take, lovable, like 5 people, I don't know, like $20 million. It'll take fewer people to launch very important revenue generating companies. And so what does that do? If your MVP basically we're collaborating, Ezinne and I are very ambitious. So we're talking to like a dev company about how to rewrite the Agile manifesto in the age of AI. And they told us we went in knowing everything about AI, and not everything, but like being conversant. They told us that when people sit down with them to contract their work and describe the thing they're building, they turn around and build an entire app in 4 hours, 2 to 4 hours. Okay. This is a 10x plus speed up in product development. What happens to the world? What happens to venture capital? What happens to founders when the cost of building a $20 million revenue company is $50,000 or less? Like even the thing that we're talking about changes. Like the people you need, the amount of money you need changes dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to have a huge impact on our world, the
Mm-hmm.
venture world, and the creation of wealth, basically. And so I think that people aren't looking at that intersection of how all this changes. So at, say, Phalanx, which is the product studio, we're starting to think hard about this. That's why we're trying to say, what does the Agile Manifesto look like in the age of AI? The questions you ask, like where is value and how do you capture it? These are all things that we're thinking about, we're writing about on Substack, but also we are consulting with companies to help them figure out, because everyone has the same question.
Yeah, I think society has a lot in store for it, in the near and distant future. As we get close to wrapping up here, if each of you could leave one product leadership principle for entrepreneurs, founders that are building in the decade to come, what might it be? And I'll let either of you take this so as to not put either of you on the spot.
I have one. I'll just go for it. And I said this, I wrote an article at the end of last year about how product management is shaping and what it should be doing in 2025. And I'm going to repeat it. It is this idea that product leaders, and it's probably not an issue for most founders, but people get lost in the doing and forget that it's about value creation. Hold your teams, hold them to task, right? On, are they actually creating value for the customer in which they will exchange dollars for? Sometimes we just go into this loop of building things, polishing, what people will say, polishing a turd, maybe. We don't have time for that anymore. In bigger organizations, are your PMs actually delivering value? Or are they going off on some religious thing on how products should be done? Can the revenue team really look at what it is your team is doing and say, yes, they understand the customer and they also understand what it means to create business value? And for smaller organizations, are we beyond what it is that is actually going to drive value? So that marriage and reminder that it's about solving a problem in a way that actually drives value for the customer as well as the business. If not, we're just wasting resources. And I've seen a lot of waste. And I don't think we can afford that anymore, particularly in the age of AI, where it takes so little to build so much value. So there's going to be competition. People need to defend why they need yet another head count or person count. So they're just really paying close attention and making sure there's no gap between value creation for everything your product folks are doing.
It's almost like
you have your wise,
back,
you have your wise eyes, isn't it? You're looking
I do.
So I have 3 quick hits. I can't do just one. One is, when paradigm shift, you have to be extra flexible. You have to put on your dancing shoes. It sort of goes to the curiosity we talked about. You have to understand that this particular time is not time to be sure about anything. And so you have to optimize for dealing with uncertainty. So high curiosity, high review, high questioning, at the same time, high confidence in the things that you have decided. If you can navigate that so that you don't get paralyzed, uncertainty has to be managed, and you have to have a slice of your brain, a slice of your team that like processes new information without getting distracted, makes quick decisions, and lives with them. That's one. 2, customers. Customer taste was changing because the technology level has changed, right? And so there's focus on the workflow is good because you find the long-term abiding customer needs, but the taste, the form and function that it shows up in is changing. So you have to reinterrogate, reoccupy, almost telepathically, what your customers are doing. And you have to create a system to do that. You can't do it like lean back or we'll talk to customers like every couple. That's not going to work. It's just not. Because customers don't know their own taste, right? You have to interrogate it and then reinterpret it, which is what product-led is versus customer-led. Reinterpret it into tastes that what you heard means. And the third one is a reflection of what Ezinne said, sharp problems. there are many markets and problems that are not lucrative and they're not sharp enough. Like when I was with, one of the things that CEO of Calendly taught me, or I sharpened while I was walking with him, was we try not to work on things that have workarounds. We work on the sharpest problems, things that are so hard. And once we solve them, the market is created. Super important. If you're not working on a sharp problem, something that basically solving it creates its own demand, you should question yourself, basically, as a founder. So those are the 3 quick hits.
That's great. Awesome, guys. I think
Yeah.
that wraps it up. This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys had fun while doing this. And
No,
Yeah.
you were the bestest host.
no,
I'm not gonna say the same thing to all the other hosts, but you are the bestest.
you know what? Transparent. It was a lot of fun doing it with both of you guys. It was unique.